Wow. Week 2 guest is someone who was at IU when I started 30 years ago tomorrow. I started at IU back on August 30th, 1992. I drove my little red Honda Civic from West by God, Virginia University to Bloomington. And the next day I started teaching 30 students in P540 on learning theories. We only had 4 or 5 at West Virginia. We had a lot more folks here because the course hadn't been taught for a while. Dr. Don Cunningham had moved to Australia to hang out there for a couple of years before coming back. And students like, Pete, Dr. Honebein were he wasn't in that class. I know he had already taken it probably. But what happened at West Virginia is I had a student knock on my door in January of 1992. And she says, her name is Padma Maduri. And Padma created a learning center with me for kids at risk that I just showed you. The learning center there, those kids, the inner city kids. And it was 2.5 hour drive each way. And she says, you need to go to Indiana University. And I said, well, why? She said, well, they got a fancy building they're building. You don't have to drive 2.5 hours to get to your subjects and all this. And besides, I got back from a conference last week and oh my God, the people at the conference, Indiana University people. There's a guy named Tom Duffy doing this constructivism stuff. And he had 5 grad students with him. And I'm sure one was named Pete Honebein. I'm sure maybe another one was named Barry Fishman or something. I'm sure there are a couple others that I know as well. But I bet you that she was talking about you, Pete. She says, you need to go to Indiana University. And then about a month later, my father says, you need to go to Indiana University. He opened the letter that I got while taking care of my kids, and I was in Paris at the time. And he opens up this Indiana University, building a new building, all built with AT&T wiring. And my father worked for AT&T his whole life. So I had my former student, my father tell me to go to Indiana. So in fact, 30 years ago tomorrow, I went off to Indiana. And there are certain people who immediately contacted me in the hallway, can you be in my dissertation and all this? I never had that conversation with Pete Honebein, with Dr. Honebein. He didn't want me on his dissertation. I heard I was kind of hard, I think, or something, I don't know. But Pete's been a very, very, very successful person. Same was Barry Fishman at the same time as you, Pete?
Yeah, Barry, Tom Welsh.
Tom, I was on his dissertation and his wife's.
Yeah, but both of them, they're still in Chico, and Tom's a professor at Chico State. Yeah. And then Tom Brush, he was part of our cohort. Tammy Chaney, yeah.
Who Chaney? Lynn Chaney, what was her name?
No, Tammy Chaney.
Tammy Chaney, right? Tammy, yeah.
She didn't go into academia. She went to go work for Lilly. Eli Lilly.
Yeah, right. That's right. And Tom Brush became our department chair. Now he's a faculty member. And did you have Badrul Khan in any classes?
I did. Yep.
He was our guest last week.
Yeah, that's what you mentioned. Yeah.
To start us off. So Pete is president of Honebein Associates, also customer performance group. And he researches, designs, and develops innovative employee training and customer support for improving their products and systems and designs. He's an adjunct faculty at the University of Nevada, Reno, as well.
Not anymore.
He was at the University of Reno, Nevada, Reno, and Boise State University and Indiana University. So 3 universities. He taught graduate, undergraduate courses in performance technology, instructional design, marketing, customer experience. He's an award-winning designer and consultant. He'll talk about maybe his designs for the Coast Guard, U.S. Coast Guard, and Exxon, for the Exxon Valdez oil spill, working for NOAA. He's also worked for various other companies that maybe he can describe, won awards from the International Society of Performance Improvement, and edited one of their journals for a while. And you can read his various publications, including his book, Creating Do-It-Yourself Customers and Strategies for Effective Customer Education. And there's much more that we could say and talk about in introductions, but I've sent you his bio. So you had a chance for a full read through some of it and maybe come up with a few questions. If you didn't, Sunmei has put in the Jamboard a place you can post some questions. So please, Sunmei, put that link back up here again for us. We had a couple people who were here for the first hour, had to go put kids to bed, but we'll record this. We have 18 total students in the class. Most will watch this afterwards. Some are here with us now. Pete, before we get into the 7 deadly sins article or whatever it was that you wrote, could you fill in some of the gaps in your bio, first of all, and I'll have a follow-up for that. So tell us a little bit about your story of why you came to IU. I think I read that, that everyone was kind of saying you need to do what you want to do. You had to get a doctorate from Indiana University, and so you did. And then has it worked out? What have you enjoyed along the way?
Yeah, great. Thanks so much for having me, Kurt. And nice to meet everybody who's in Kurt's class and part of the whole IU crowd. So my story began in San Francisco. And I was originally working at a recruitment advertising agency because I thought I was going to be somebody who worked in advertising. But I could not get a job in real advertising, so I got a job in sort of quasi-advertising, which was basically recruitment ads. And this was back in 1980, 85, 86. And I was teaching myself how to program computers at that point in time as well. I was also starting an MBA program in San Francisco that the company I worked for provided tuition reimbursement for.
Wow.
And so as I kind of moved along, I knew that I wanted to try to do something entrepreneurial at some point in time. And so fast forward to 1987, I switched jobs to work for a graphic design firm. It was right at the time that Apple was introducing desktop publishing. The graphic design firm that I was working for had Macintosh computers. And what we were noticing in our business was that clients would go, "Oh, I don't need you graphic designers anymore because, I've got desktop publishing on this Macintosh thing." And then a couple of weeks later, they would come back and they go, "It's not as easy as we thought it would be. And so we still want you to help us with the graphic design." And that sprung between this gentleman, Craig Shoemaker, who was one of the partners of the firm, and myself. We shared technology and design and those types of things. And between him and I, we hatched this plan to create a learning program called DTP Advisor, which was to teach people on a Macintosh using HyperCard software how to do desktop publishing. So Craig was the subject matter expert because he's the graphic designer. I was the builder since I had taught myself how to program and how to use HyperCard and those types of things. And we developed a product. And that product was DTP Advisor. We shopped it around to a number of different companies to acquire from us, essentially to publish for us. And ultimately, Broderbund Software, I don't know if any of you remember that particular name, but they did.
Well, there you go.
A whole variety of things. Carmen San Diego.
I just mentioned Carmen. You remember any others?
I do not.
Oregon Trail,
Carmen
maybe.
San Diego.
Yeah, where in the world is Carmen San Diego? Where in the USA is Carmen San Diego?
Yep.
So that was my master's thesis project, looking at divergent and convergent, what we call computer-assisted instruction softwares. From the learning company was another one. Wings for Learning was another one. Broderbund was one. There's a couple other. You probably if I hit the name, but yeah, it's in my master's thesis in one of the appendices, a list of about 30 different software packages. Rocky's Boots was like a logic game that you played. Yeah, I remember all those.
They had a whole bunch of things.
So they bought you out.
They didn't bought us out. They basically published our work.
Oh, okay.
Because that's the way that business model was for these types of products. So essentially, our program got shown at Macworld. We sold a whopping 5,000 copies of it, and I did not become a millionaire overnight. So I had to find something else to do.
Hey, 5,000 is better than I've sold. And, I had a software company for a bit called SurveyShare. It's kind of like SurveyMonkey. I was kind of a year too late. We probably had, millions of people use the free version, right? And maybe, hundreds of people use the paid version. But I've experimented with software myself, and I never want to do it again. It's a giant sucking sound of money going out the door, building stuff. It was fun building stuff. I built 8 share sites along the way, but SurveyShare was just one of them. But Course Share, Instructor Share, Quiz Share, and University Share, all these things. But I got it out of my system, and I don't want to do it again. I know what you mean. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
So we did this product, and then we were looking for some other things to do. And my project manager at Broderbund, she had this interesting degree, because at this point in time, I have no clue what instructional systems design is. It's just Craig and I started building this thing, and it worked out, and people really liked the design of it. So I talked to Joanne and said, hey, what's this instructional design thing? Because I was looking to either get a master's in computer science or in something else. And so she said, oh, well, it's this thing. It's about how to design instruction, and it's pretty cool. And I went to San Francisco State, and I can introduce you to Gene Michaels, who is an Indiana person from way back, and he was the department chair. So I went and talked with Gene Michaels. I showed him our DTP advisor, and he looked at me and said, so what you're doing now is what we teach our students to do. So if you're really interested in this particular field, you need to go get a PhD, and you need to go to Indiana to do it. And I'm like, yeah, no, I barely made it out of college with, a 2.2 grade point average or something like that. And so I talked to my wife about it. She was getting burnt out on her job. And so I contacted IU. We flew out there, had a nice meeting with Tom Schwen. Schwen connected me to Duffy. Duffy and I hit it off. And the rest is history. So we left San Francisco, moved to Bloomington, and spent 4 years there.
Can I ask a couple of quick questions? So I just had lunch with Tom Schwen. He's still alive. He almost died of a heart surgery a few years back. We had lunch with Feng Kui Wang, who's brought his daughter to come to school. He was a student in the 90s. I don't know if you know him, Feng Kui Wang from Taiwan.
No, I do not.
So he had many degrees from IU. But at San Francisco State, did you happen to talk to a woman named Dr. Kim Foreman?
No.
Korean. So she went to grad school with me at Wisconsin, went to San Fran State, and I dedicated one of my books to her because she's passed away a few years ago in a traffic accident in Rwanda. But she was a lovely person. San Fran State and Ewha Women's University in Korea are pipelines to Indiana University IST program. The students in Korea get sent, and the students in San Francisco get sent over. There's a few other pipelines as well, but that we've gotten a number of San Francisco people. Sume, my assistant in this class, is from San Francisco. She's at Stanford. So
cool. Yeah. Good. Yeah. So anyway, my timing was very good in 1990 because constructivism was beginning to expand and explode. And so with the people that we've mentioned before and with Tom Duffy, we did pretty much everything that one could do at that particular time in figuring out what a constructivist learning environment is all about. The article that you've all taken a look at, hopefully, of the 7 goals for constructivist learning environments was kind of the first publication that took various projects that I was working on. I had an assistantship and basically worked for whatever the Center for Teaching and Learning, I think it's what it's called now, and basically built things for faculty, built a whole variety of things for faculty.
You did that. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. I know all the people since then have been, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was really a pretty cool environment. And so, you know, the lab design project that you took a look at, you know, was representative of, you know, constructivist learning environments in terms of how you embed various activities and media and things like that that are part of those seven principles. And so a lot of my work there was applying those principles to those types of projects. And from there, when I started doing my dissertation, which was with Dave Marrero up at IUPUI Med School, we were working on some things to teach second-year medical students how to care for people with diabetes. And so that started integrating other types of media like video discs and how we do both the blending of self-instruction as well as instructor-led as a constructivist environment, and you know, a variety of things like that to kind of mash things around and figure it out. So that's kind of where the foundation came from in terms of my worldview. And I'll stop for a second to see if anybody has any questions about what I've presented thus far.
Anyone want to jump in? Remember, we've got the Jamboard too. I don't see any questions yet in the Jamboard. So,
okay, so I'll continue on. So 1994, I waved goodbye to Indiana.
yeah, I saw you down the street.
Yeah, my wife and I decided to not relocate back to San Francisco. We decided to locate to Reno, Nevada. We did that because in Bloomington, my wife and I were starting a business to make microwavable bed warmers, and I was going to be doing consulting. And so between my wife and I, we started this business. I was doing consulting and going from there. The type of consulting that I was primarily doing at that particular time was not as an instructional designer, but as a social scientist working with scientific instruments and doing the user interface design and human factors design of various software applications that many of you probably have heard about. One was the system that sequenced the human genome, which was called the 3700. Another one, if you've had COVID and have taken a PCR test, I was on the team that created the first real-time PCR system back in about 95, 96. And so with those, that was one focus of the business. And we did a lot, or I did a lot of things with a variety of high-tech companies that were within the scientific instruments area. My career continued. I became a gentleman in Bloomington, Rick Goldsworthy. He also went through our program.
I know Rico well. I haven't seen him. I know Rico very well. I haven't seen him in forever, but
I haven't seen him forever. He's kind of disappeared on me.
Yeah.
But so Rick basically got NIH contracts and to develop really innovative learning experiences.
Yeah.
And so
he was more focused on special ed at the time.
Yeah.
He had more grant money, as an aside for everyone. He had more grant money than the faculty in the department, you know. So, and Sonny Kirkley, I don't know if you met Sonny.
Yep.
He started. So Sonny lives two blocks from my house, and he had more grant money. And Jamie, his wife, more grant money than any of the faculty. He now is an adjunct in informatics, and she's helps with grant writing at IU. So.
Yep.
So you know Sonny, okay.
I have. No, they were all part of my cohort. So,
yeah.
so that was good. Since we're talking about instructional design, one of the things when I say I was doing scientific instruments and this and that, is that as an instructional designer, or really a human performance technologist, the career that you can have can morph in a whole variety of different ways. So sometimes I'm a marketer, sometimes I'm a human performance person, sometimes I'm an instructional designer. Today, I was an instructional designer. Earlier this morning, I was a human performance analyst. And so my career has, just it's whatever clients need, and those type of skill sets are what I provide. I usually call myself an innovations analyst because most of the things that I work with are innovations of one type or another that include human performance characteristics of enabling people to use those particular technologies, teaching people how to use those technologies, the marketing aspect of pushing those technologies out into the market to where they get used and those types of things. So as my career continued from the 1990s into, let's say, the early 2000s, the whole idea of constructivist learning has continued in terms of how I do design work. One of the people that I worked a lot with is a gentleman named Daryl Sink. And you may or may not know that particular name, but he was a IU student from 1973 or 78, I believe. And he started an instructional design firm.
Right.
And so I was not an employee of his, but we hit it off at one point in time in Bloomington. And so since about 1993, I was doing projects for him when he needed an extra pair of hands. And he and I have had a very long and productive working relationship from 1993 up until today. And he and his wife Jane are still alive. So
wow, I know others that worked for him too, that come out of our program. So yeah, I've heard that. I've met him. Yeah, I know him. Yeah.
Yep. So Daryl, so what I do for Daryl is basically run a lot of the projects. So I'm of that role of being kind of the primary designer, and then depending on the size of the project, that we bring in other designers to do that. We've done work for Hewlett Packard, but in 2005 we had a really great opportunity with a company called Learning Tree International. Mm-hmm. And Learning Tree International, they're based in the Washington, D.C. area. And they basically focused on management and technical training, so that if you wanted to be a project manager, they would teach you that. If you wanted to know how to design software, they would teach you that. If you wanted to know how to do user requirements, they would teach you to do that. And the president who was running the company at that particular point in time wanted to begin to create more learning experiences. Okay. And so back in the day, in around that 2000 timeframe, the idea of learning experiences really wasn't used very much. It was still just designing instruction. But with a number of things that were going on in Silicon Valley in terms of user interface design for software and things like that, I began to see the utility of taking the idea of user experience and applying it to instructional design products and those types of things, to where you're just not like creating a training class, you're creating a learning experience, which was more than the sum of the parts. It wasn't just what the content was, but it might be what type of pencils or what type of markers do we provide learners, when they come into a class? How do we bring in various video scenarios of things in an instructor-led class and that type of stuff? And so with Learning Tree, we were able to explore a whole variety of really interesting things. I think we ended up doing redesigning 36 different classes that they had in the mid 2000s. And they branded it as a branded product called Reality Plus. The Reality Plus comes from the idea of constructivist learning environments where we're trying to include those authentic activities and really drive experiences that learners would kind of what our objective was that when the class, if it was a 4-day class, when the class was over for one of those days, students would still hang around the instructor to talk about the scenarios that they were working with and you know, the ill-defined concepts and how they would apply things differently and stuff like that. And so that was really a work that we did that really began to hone a lot of ideas around the blending between learning experience and constructivism. And nowadays you'll see, what's his name? Matt Schmidt at the University of Florida, and the work that he and his team is doing on defining and describing and basically bringing to market this idea of learning experiences.
Interesting. Do you know that University of Florida has hired the most people in our field? The department has grown the most because the state of Florida gave them new money.
Wow.
So IST there, ed tech there, is probably one of the largest in the country now. It wasn't back when you were a student.
Oh yeah, no, it was not. So if you haven't had a chance to look at Matt Schmidt's work, I really suggest that you do that. He has a lot of really interesting ideas that kind of, and he and I have talked, we've met each other at conferences and have had phone calls and things like that. And what he told me once, he goes, you know, I feel like I've just been writing your coattails since, you know, the 1994, because pretty much everywhere when I see things, there's something from you that pushes this idea of learning experiences together. And
interesting.
And
so we have a couple questions in the window. Before we go to those two questions, can you tell us a couple of there's 7 goals. So what are a couple of the important goals for the design of constructivist environments, and what are a couple of important principles for constructivistic environments? Because their final task in this class is to create an effective learning environment, of course. So you want to give them some hints about what they're going to be able to do?
Sure. So of the 7, the ones that are my favorites are number 2, provide experience in and appreciation for multiple perspectives. Okay, so the idea of multiple perspectives is that when you're teaching an ill-defined task or concept, that it is ill-defined means that there's a whole variety of ways that you could solve this particular problem. And so in having multiple perspectives, you bring in different ways of how either students or outside subject matter experts or whatever. I mean, it's sort of an open-ended type of thing of how you interpret that idea of multiple perspectives and how you implement it in terms of media to be able to allow the learner to see different ways and then even create their own ways of that. Meaning that the learner can say, okay, I saw that, I saw that, I saw that. Okay, now I'm going to mash that stuff up together and do it in a way that I think can take those different things that are influences to where I can create whatever I'm creating and delivering it to my learners. The other one, which is right after number 2, which is embed learning in realistic and relevant contexts, is really why I went back to school to get an instructional design degree, because when I was in school, it was, pretty much all drill and practice and stuff like that. And I hated it. And so
I was an accounting major, so tell me about it.
Yeah, exactly. So, so embedding instruction within realistic contexts really, and you got to remember, most of I'm not a K through 12 type of person. Most of my clients or people I design for are adults. So this may not be something that would be, I mean, it's useful for K through 12, but for adults, I feel that it's more relevant to what they're doing. Let me look at a couple others. Number 6, which is encourage the use of multiple modes of representation. So this has become really important. And Charlie Reigeluth and I have written a couple of papers about this topic. And the most recent research that we collected, you're all familiar with the Clark-Cosma debates, I assume?
Do you know that Cosma lives near you? He's in Reno.
Oh, is he really?
And he's been a guest in my 511 class. I just helped him get a book contract recently, or advised him on it. So he's going with Wiley. But yeah, he's written a new book, and he was a guest maybe a year and a half ago. Yeah, he's in Reno. And he's a great guy.
Well, connect me.
Yeah, I will. Yeah.
I'd be interested.
Yeah.
So Charlie Reigeluth and I have been writing papers about things that we've seen in the field, primarily that confounded studies are still alive and well, and they're not all that useful, is our perspective on that. And so what we've moved from is from more of the content side of that discussion to more of how media should be used and applied. And the primary idea that we've been working with for the past 3 years is that instructional design is a complex system. Okay, and as a complex system, the designer really cannot understand it. And if you want to learn more about complex systems, there's some other papers of mine that talk about instruction in complex systems and those types of things from more of a design standpoint. So the ideas that we're playing with is that, okay, so if instruction is a complex system and we can't know all the different variables that go into that instruction, why even bother with comparative studies? Okay. And why not just do research that looks at research to improve rather than research to or focus on research to improve rather than research to prove. So a lot of confounded studies are more trying to prove something rather than to improve it. And so that's the direction that we're moving right now in how to think about design research and what the research should look like that moves away from confounded variables and comparative studies and those types of things.
So we may have Tom Reeves from Georgia come talk to us about design-based research and about authentic learning. His work with Jan Harrington and Ron Oliver is in your syllabus, several articles from them. well, when you presented the first goal, Christian tried to talk and I cut him off. I saw Christian was really trying to cut in there. So Christian, what did you want to say?
So at the very end, you're talking about goal 2 that is provide experience in and appreciation for multiple perspectives. At the end of you discussing why you found that important, you talked about something that seemed very much like needs analysis of the project. So you're talking about how all these perspectives add different layers to the project, and basically it's needs, whatever the instructional needs are. And it just struck me as you're talking about, it was like a needs analysis for that project. And those different perspectives are absolutely required for that needs analysis.
Yeah, I generally agree with that. I mean, you know, I blend all this stuff together, right? So I don't necessarily say, okay, this is needs analysis, you know, unless I'm, you know, that it's really focused on that. But in terms of designing instruction, having the multiple perspectives does lend itself to then understanding what the needs are in terms of what those multiple perspectives might be. So you would drop down into that type of analysis to discover what type of multiple perspectives might be reasonable for the audience that you're working with.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got
like this. Oh, go ahead. Like
go ahead.
The scientific experiment, or the one that you were talking about in the 7 Goals paper, about the science research rooms, or what were they? Science. You're looking at the lab layouts. You have to think about who's going to be in the lab.
Yeah, yeah. You just Christian, you just hit your mute button. So I don't know if that was on purpose or just excitement of waving your hands. Yeah.
Well, he's always excited. He's getting excited thinking about a dissertation. There's 3 questions in the chat. Did you finish, Christian? There's 3 questions. Probably one of them's Christian's, I'm assuming.
Two of them are.
2 of them are. So whose question is not Christian's in the chat in the Jamboard? Let's start with that person.
Mine. My question is in the middle.
Okay, go ahead.
So let me look back. So I was just asking, what advice would you give to young designers regarding how to balance the iron triangle?
Okay. So the iron triangle basically is a theory that describes how effectiveness, efficiency, and appeal operate together. And the idea came from collecting some data about how designers, they were IU students were my subjects for it, how they take different types of concepts and things of that nature and determine what's most useful for a particular type of instruction. And so how you use the iron triangle is primarily from your subject matter expert or your client, all right? Because that subject matter expert or client is going to be the one who has the power to determine how certain details of a learning experience will be either implemented or not implemented. And so it's the conversation that you would have with a client is really of what their priorities are for each of those 3 elements of effectiveness, efficiency, and appeal. And, you know, some clients will say, well, you know, we want it to be effective, but I'm willing to sacrifice appeal to make it efficient, because in our business, we do not have all that much time to put people into training programs or things like that to do that. It might work another way to where, yes, we want it to be effective, but it's got to be appealing because it's a type of content that has more affective elements to it or more affective effectiveness, to where we're trying to persuade people or to get them to see things and adopt a new technology or a new innovation or things like that. I'll pause for a second because you probably have follow-up questions.
Not yet. I'm just listening and thinking. Right now, I'm a speech language pathologist, and I have looked at how I've applied the iron triangle works in my field, and I think I struggle a lot with the efficiency because of the time it takes, and I focus a lot on effectiveness, and we also have to look at appeal. So I'm trying now to see how this applies in the world of IST, and later just planning ahead and anticipating that this will come up in the future when I'm working, and just really taking in what you're saying.
Yeah. So a lot of it comes from listening. Like I said before, the client is driving this. You as a designer can potentially move them to different places, but a lot of the times it's just that it has to be this way. And it's kind of one of those things of where you just like, okay, let's do it that way then. And you recognize that, even though you might have had grand visions for what this would look like, you have to scale things back or to change things depending on the nature of the situation. And so really everything is situation based, which is kind of when, if you're familiar with the instructional design framework that Charlie Reigerluth and I have been working on, that's really what your picture of the world is. And it really drives what decisions that you make.
Got it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Mm-hmm.
So does anyone else want to jump in here before Christian comes back with his questions? Please do. That includes you, Sunmi.
I'm just listening to him. That's because everything is really good for me. Especially, he said that research to improve and just got out of mind. That's because always I try to prove, my approach works. And then he pointed out that, and then, oh, yeah, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's good. And then actually I have one question. That's because actually I studied this field for a long time, but I never, worked as an instructional designer. That's because I'm a app developer, mobile, educational mobile app developer.
Mm-hmm.
So
Stanford.
I have no idea about that. So what is the most important skill as an instructional designer, do you think?
The most important skill
Or set of skills.
or set of skills. Basically, if you look at the instructional design framework, it's things that I've said earlier, which is understanding the situation and then working through that particular flow chart to gather the data that you need to be able to be an asset to your client, to be able to advise them in a variety of ways, and to be able to then dream things up that you can implement.
Yeah, it seems that, actually, I think that you mean that, so we have to fully understand what client want, right? So it means that we can.
It's not just what the client wants. It's you have to understand the entire situation. Okay.
Oh,
Because the client, it goes back to the idea of multiple perspectives, right? Which is part of the seven goals for constructivist learning environments, is that a client might say, okay, I want to develop this learning experience and it should only be 2 days and I want to teach all these fancy things and so on and so forth. And you may have other perspectives to be able to insert that or to look at how other aspects in the situation. Remember, instructional design is a complex system. Okay, we can't know everything, but we can know various pieces and parts as we begin to move into design work where we're trying things out and throwing things in the garbage can, and ultimately a design evolves and it goes from there. So it's a good designer will know about the situation. They can write instructional objectives in their sleep, meaning good instructional objectives. Okay, condition, behavior, standard of performance. The number of papers that I review for ETR&D that researchers do not provide instructional objectives for is unbelievable. And it's currently my Don Quixote poking at windmills analogy for that. And it's basic. It's the fundamentals. I got my situation, I got my instructional objectives, and I got a sense of what the media is going to be like. And if a designer knows those 3 things and they're written down in a way that makes sense to the designer, these are not for learners. It's specifically what Charlie Reigerluth calls design objectives. Okay, they're for the designer. And once you have that, then everything else just flows. I mean, I can't make it any simpler. Is once you have those foundational elements of our science, then you kind of know what the path is going to be, and then it's all about, well, can the client afford fancy graphics and media and things like that, or can't they? Does it need to be a self-instructional lesson? Does it need to be a hybrid lesson? Does it have to be both at the same time? The one project that I've been working on has instructor-led, which is basically developed in RISE, and then the instructor-led is led by an instructor, and then the self-instruction is articulate RISE, and those 2 things get blended together.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
That really built on Mika's question a bit, so that was good that the 2 connected together. I will say the reference to Clark and Cosma, Bob Cosma and Richard Clark is a famous debate that we cover in 511. So if you take my 511 class, you read the Clark and Cosma debate. And back when Pete was in the program, and Dr. Badrul Khan and others, that was a quals question, the famous debate often for, I think they used that article or that debate for 2 decades. Mm-hmm. I do not think when you take quals, you will get that. They finally moved on to other kinds of questions, but it's still an important question. And we had fortunate to get, so Bob Cosma, when he was at Michigan, helped me as a graduate student at Wisconsin. He had some funding. We didn't get the funding, but he helped me structure my project in creating a system for computer prompting and writing, keystroke mapping, and all of this stuff. And he's a great guy, great person. So I'll connect you to and whenever visit Reno, the 3 of us can go out. So we need to go to Christian's questions. Christian.
I'll ask one of them because I think I know the answer to the other one. So how do you see just-in-time learning fitting into constructivist learning methods? Or
Define
do you
just
at
in,
all?
what's your definition of just-in-time learning?
So, I mean, I think I see it as anything from like going to YouTube where somebody has figured out where a setting is on your iPhone and how to change it, to like an Adobe brush and how to use it, like an actual like formal design versus like something that's like somebody just slapped it up because they found out how to do it.
Okay, so how that fits in is it fits constructivist learning experiences very well. When you look through the 7 goals, basically you would see something with each of those goals for that type of scenario. So for example, realistic and relevant context. All right, so I've got my car and something's not working right with it. And so now I want to, actually a better example, my furnace. I've got a humidifier on my furnace and it's starting to leak. All right, I'm in a realistic and relevant context, right? Because I'm looking at the furnace, I'm looking at the leak, and now I've got to say, okay, can I fix this myself or not, right? And so then I might shift to different perspectives, because now I'll get on some other websites and see what people are talking about that particular part and how you actually do it.
Reddit's great.
We've got the provide experience with the knowledge construction process. You're constructing your own knowledge, right? In doing that and putting it all together yourself. As we move down, ownership and voice in the learning process, sure, that, check that particular box. Social experience, yeah, however deep down the rabbit hole you want to go, sure, check that box. Multiple nodes of representation, okay, you got the guy who shows you how to change the part with a really crappy video, and another guy who has a really long video, but it's really elegant. Okay, and that's choices that you need, which begin to bring in effectiveness, efficiency, and appeal of that particular presentation. And then self-awareness of the knowledge construction process. So when you in that scenario that you've provided, all of those things are happening, right? And what the problem is feedback. Okay, presentation, practice, feedback. So those particular systems, they present you the content. Okay. You can somehow practice it, although usually when I practice that, I bust something. Okay, and now I'm like, crap. Then I have to go higher.
2 parts.
Now I need 2 parts for it. And then, something else happens, right? Because then it's just like, no, I'm just going to let the plumber do it. So effectiveness, efficiency, presentation, practice, and then feedback. And what the YouTube videos really don't give you that's necessary is that real-time feedback, to where, all right, I'm going to start, taking this part off. Oh, well, did you turn off the power? Oh, no, I didn't. Well, you didn't want to turn off the power. Otherwise it's, you might kill yourself, type of thing. So, when you look at those types of designs, and especially with constructivist type designs, it's the feedback that really becomes the most important. And feedback is the most expensive of everything that you're going to do, because you want somebody there to help you along, which is why you are taking Kurt's class and paying for an instructor like Kurt, because Kurt can now, no matter what you do in the class, you can say, okay, well, I'm doing this, and it happens to be with speech therapy and stuff like that. And Kurt will probably be able to help you figure it out for that specific niche. And so, where lots of instructional systems begin to break down is when you have that lack of feedback and you essentially tell your learner, go get them, tiger.
Well, you know why Cindy's been laughing the whole time? Because Cindy had a little problem this afternoon. You want to tell them what it was?
Actually, yesterday's my water heater, just didn't work. And then actually I came up with some plan. The first of all, I have to make a list, and then I search for the, company with a lot of good review from Yelp. And then I made a list and then I contact them and then I collected the fastest feedback and then so when can you come and then just make a list and then I chose 3 company actually from the 7. So actually they came today and then I requested to get a quote. That's because everyone said that you have to replace it. So I made the decisions. Okay, I have to replace it. What is the next step? And then so there are several options. The first time is exactly same thing. Next one is electricity or just tankless something, right? I asked that, but as for the electricity, I needed to electricity technician as well. So, I don't want it. That's because it's urgent. That's because my water heater doesn't work right now. So, okay, the emergency is important. So I made, updated the list and then just emergency and then cost and then tankless is over $8,000. So my God, no, it's too expensive and then it takes time. So okay, forget it. Just exactly just to replace it with the same one. And then I made actually we can see the quote from the 3 company and then I got it and then I chose the cheapest one. That's because it's a little bit similar, but actually $300 difference. So actually I chose the cheapest one. So actually I followed that process. That's because I did a lot before. So it came and then just it happened today and then tomorrow I will get the new one.
So authentic problem. It's an authentic for you. It's so there you go.
And I do a lot of whitewater river rafting, right? And so we'll get on a river and I could have done that river previously, but the water level's higher than it was the last time I did it. And now you have to, make decisions that are different than what you did it last time. So learning's fun. I've made plenty of mistakes, so.
So we've got 5 or 10 minutes left here, and I want to make sure if you have a website to show us or something you want to flag there, I can give you. I think you might be able to share without being a co-host if you want. And there's a question still on the Jamboard from last hour that hasn't been answered. Does anyone want to jump in here with a question at this point or a comment? Go.
I have one more question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Actually, I just, sometimes I experience that feeling. So actually you realize that, I can support that client. That's because that client requested really difficult or not impossible one, something from your perspective. So what should you do at that time? How to, just to give a advice?
So just to rephrase, this is a client who you're having some conflict with in terms of directions to go and stuff like that?
Yeah, actually they want something, but you think that that's not possible with this, context or condition. Yeah, so what should you do at the time?
So typically,
do you have to accept the client?
well, no. I mean, the client says, "I want to do this," right? And this could be whatever. And part of your expertise comes from determining whether or not that is possible, and whether or not you're willing to. If it's right on the edge, if you're willing to stick with that client to get it done, which has financial implications. So for example, project that I'm working on now is a 6-week Contracts and Purchasing Academy. When we first built it in 2014, it was an instructor-led course. And then COVID hit. So the client wanted to turn it into a hybrid course that was mostly self-instruction with instructor-led as well. A lot of the beginning aspects of it is our team prototyping and testing. Okay, so that I'm good with a client giving me a big kind of a big picture view of what they want, and then being able to say yes and to that picture. Not, oh no, I can't do that. It's more of where you go, yes, and maybe if we were able to do it this way, then that would be more efficient for you and wouldn't cost all the money to do it that way. So typically it's a collaboration with the client, and sometimes there's risk to the designer, especially if it's a fixed price contract, meaning that you bid the project and essentially say, okay, I'll do this project for $100,000. If it's bigger than you thought, then potentially you might be eating some of the costs. But if you can then pull it off, then you could actually be making a lot of money. So it's not telling the client no, but more of yes and of how it could be done, prototyping to determine feasibility. So, you know, if a client told you this, then in the contract that you make with that particular client, it would be good to specify kind of different phases to where, you know, you get this milestone to where we're going to do feasibility to see if it works. And if it doesn't work, then, you know, we're done and we're not moving on. If it does work, then we'll go to the next stage and to the next stage. And eventually you get to a point of no return where you got to help the client. So like with the project that we're working on now, we did our first beta test. It just finished this past week. And during the beta test, the learning management system basically started losing students' progress, the data about what they've taken and what they've done. And so I spent a lot of time trying to track down what that bug was. And ultimately, it was the learning management system, which the client required us to use. And so we're now still trying to resolve that. We think we have a solution to it. And I won't deal you with the details of government agencies and the slow pace that they move with. Yeah, I mean, something will always go wrong, and you just have to try to provide either a contract that enables you to collect additional funds if that happens and it's the client's fault, or that you know that this might happen and you just have to get it done for the client.
Sounds like my work with ITT Technical Institute. They had a system, learn management system called Clicks. It was built in India, and the Indian people who built it thought the more clicks, the better. Even though every click, you had to wait 40 seconds to get to the next screen.
Yeah.
And, you know, that they thought that was effective. That was interactive the more you click. And when I got to West Virginia University, in fact, P.F. Skinner's daughter had the office next to mine. And she said, you know, here's the interactivity. It's more clicking. It's a behaviorist model. Clicking on the keyboard was interactivity, you know, and not the thinking process. So
anyway, to summarize, because I know we're toward the end of our time.
Yeah.
Instructional design is a great career. And if you can add human performance technology to it and something else, speech therapy and something else, and you will have a career that will be enjoyable and a lot of fun. And when I made that decision to move from San Francisco in 1990 and move to Bloomington, I have no regrets. It's been a great ride. I've met lots of great people, have worked on lots of great projects. And, as long as you're willing to be entrepreneurial, then those types of opportunities can come to you. So.
Anyone else? Megan's put her camera on. You have a comment, Megan?
No, I just was, since we were wrapping up, I've been on, popping back and forth with my kids. So I figured since we were wrapping up, instead of turning it on and off, on and off, on and off, I was like, let me leave it off while I'm doing all this. But, pop in, say goodbye.
Any feedback for Pete before you?
It's just been really interesting, as somebody who is entering a second career doing this doctoral program, hearing about sort of your journey and just, always wondering how to make the transition, because, as you look at jobs, it's a lot of internships, it's a lot of new stuff, and you're starting over. And you said, as you said, with the entrepreneurial aspect of it. So just.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how it all happened, but it did, and, maybe I'm, just fortunate, or maybe just being in the right place at the right time, or convincing somebody, hey, let's go put on a show type of thing. So it has all worked out, and it's been a very, very cool ride. And I continue, I'm almost 60 years old, and I still enjoy designing.
And Daryl Sinke mentioned earlier had internships at the time, and he was hiring. That's why he was hiring our students to do short projects. There are all sorts of internships in this field if you want one. Some of them are not obvious. What was your first career, Megan?
I'm still doing it. I taught high school math for 9 years, and I'm currently teaching college math. So, as I have a master's in math education. So I've been in the education, sphere for my entire career.
College math at where?
At a community college in North Carolina. I did an adjunct position at a university up here last spring also. So since moving, because I was full-time at the community college in North Carolina before I moved. So, I'm looking for full-time stuff now. So it's, just where I'm going, but yeah.
So Xiaoying, you want to say hi before Pete has to go? Xiaoying?
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. It's been a pleasure.
Xiaoying, she was my assistant last semester, AI. You're muted, Xiaoying.
Oh, sorry. Hi.
Hello.
Peter. Yeah,
Hey.
It's very informative lecture. It connect me. It reminds me of something I learned recently in the course of 7-11. Yeah, the great topic is also about what is the instructional design and what the role of our future connecting with future career to be as an instructional designer. So I just have one follow-up question about what the difference between the clients from the industry and those from the public education system in terms of their goals or their requirements, towards their instruction scenarios.
Okay. So the best way I can explain that is that for-profit businesses typically are less, in most cases, less bureaucratic and more focused on getting stuff done in a very efficient time frame. As you begin to move into the public sector, then because of the bureaucracy associated with it, work becomes a bit more difficult to move projects along and to get things done. And so we've learned a lot about that in terms of how we write our contracts and things to make sure that the client is on the hook for various things to make sure that the project continues moving forward. Now, for public education, that really isn't my field of expertise. I have designed with Rick Goldsworthy, who I mentioned earlier. We've designed things for that target audience, primarily middle school. And it was pretty risque stuff. One project that we did was an R-rated sexual education program for middle to high schoolers. We had a lot of, it was very difficult for us to move that into a school just because of the topic and the nature of it. I mean, people are like, wow, yeah, that's really cool. But when push comes to shove, you're going to have administrators who go, you know, do I really want to, you know, have this program where people are using swear words and things of that nature and talking about certain sexual things in very, very frank type of language. So
be even harder today.
It would be way harder today. And so that's one of the reasons why I don't work for public schools, because I don't need that in my life. And I'd rather work for companies, corporations, especially entrepreneurial businesses that have interesting technologies that, you know, one project that's coming up is a dental device that enables you to scan a person's mouth and help them create a perfect smile, which is really cool. So it's those types of things that I'm interested in. I'm not interested in teaching how to do math.
sorry, Megan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or that type of stuff.
So Ga hasn't spoken today, and he is in our Kelly School of Business, so you might want to meet and at least say hi. Ga, are you still there? Yeah, you're muted, by the way. There you go.
Yeah, I'm still here.
You want to say hello? Any
Hi.
questions?
Yeah,
Any comments?
it's a very interesting lecture that you have. I learned a lot tonight.
Great. And you're in the School of Business?
Yeah, I'm in the School of Business.
Yeah.
Tell them what your job is.
I'm the executive director for digital technology. So instructional technology is one of my sub teams. I don't know a lot about specific instructional technology, but one thing that we have is Studio for online education. So we're just breaking the surface of that.
Yeah. No, I did a lot of work. I did a lot of work in the School of Business. My cognate's in the School of Business, consumer behavior. And Pat Ouyang, do you remember that name?
Yeah.
You ever heard that name?
Yeah.
So Ivor Davies, who was one of my
he's still alive. His wife passed away recently, but he's still alive.
Did Sharon pass away? Yeah. So Ivor Davies got myself and this other guy, Robert Garfinkel, connected into the School of Business, and we did a bunch of workshops, evaluation of workshops in Eastern Europe back in 1992 and 93. And it was a really, really great experience as a graduate student to go out and do that. But my parting truism that Ivor Davies provided me with was, I got to remember it now. Yeah. So I walked in. I was talking with Ivor Davies, and I asked him some question, and what he said to me was, well, you know, Peter, in his English accent, ignorance is your greatest strength. And he said that, not that I was ignorant, but more that if an instructional designer goes into a situation and has that perspective of ignorance, you will be able to pick up and learn more by having that open mind and seeing what comes to you, which is what one of Sumi's questions was connected to.
Right.
So that can be my parting piece of advice.
So just to mention, Shun Ga is in the business school, which has the #1 online MBA program. Just thought I'd throw that in there. You probably are aware that they're very good. So we've enjoyed tonight. I am going to end this recording, but if anyone wants to put 3 words in the chat window of thanking Peter for coming in tonight. It's been great to have you here and to hear some real world stories of how to implement the content that you're learning. So at the count of 3, I'm going to stop the recording. So everyone say thank you, Peter, at the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Peter.
The recording is stopped.
My pleasure.